For nearly 300,000 years, somewhere on every continent, a human being is walking barefoot across volcanic rock, frozen ground, and burning sand, and surviving it. Not by accident. Not by toughness alone. Not even because shoes hadn't been invented yet. The real explanation was buried inside something you'd never expect. Something scientists almost didn't believe. And once they figured out what it was, it shattered everything we assumed about the primitive human body. The question is, why did it take so long for people to start wearing shoes? That's what we're about to uncover. Stick around and subscribe to The Buried Layer so you never miss what's buried next. In 2005, a biological anthropologist named Daniel Lieberman at Harvard University started looking closely at feet, specifically at what feet looked like before shoes existed. What he found changed the way scientists think about human movement forever. Lieberman and his team studied people in Kenya and Mexico who had grown up without shoes. They compared those people to runners in the United States who wore modern cushioned sneakers. The difference wasn't just cultural, the difference was physical. The barefoot walkers and runners had fundamentally different feet, thicker skin on the soles, wider toe spread, stronger arches. And when they moved differently, landing on the middle or front of the foot, rather than slamming down on the heel. His research was published in the journal Nature Times in 2010, and it caused a genuine earthquake in the world of sports science. Lieberman argued that the human foot is not a flawed design waiting to be corrected by technology. It is, instead, one of the most sophisticated, shock-absorbing, force-distributing structures ever produced by millions of years of evolution. Here's what the fossil record shows us. Roughly 3.7 million years ago, a group of human ancestors walked across wet volcanic ash in what is now Lake Toli, Tanzania. Their footprints were preserved. Scientists call this site the Lake Toli Trackway. The species that made those prints is called Times Australopithecus afarensis, times the same group as the famous fossil known as Lucy. Those footprints show a fully developed arch and a forward-pointing big toe, almost identical to a modern human foot. In other words, our feet were already highly evolved for walking long before anyone considered wrapping them in animal hide. The earliest confirmed shoes' actual physical artifacts come from a cave in Armenia called Arini 1. In 2010, archaeologist Ron Pinghasi from University College Cork and his team published their findings in the journal Times PLOS ONE. They found a single leather shoe, stuffed with grass, radiocarbon dated to approximately 5,500 years old. It is the oldest complete shoe ever found, carefully stitched, well preserved. Clearly made by someone who knew what they were doing. But here's where it gets unsettling. That shoe was not the invention of shoes. It was already a sophisticated, refined object. It had a heel piece, lacing holes, and shaped leather. That means shoes must have existed long before Arni. One, they just didn't survive. Leather, plant fiber, and woven grass rot away quickly. Only exceptional conditions like the cold, dry environment inside Arani, one preserved them. Scientists believe sandals and simple foot coverings may go back 30,000 to 40,000 years, based not on shoes themselves, but on something far more interesting: feet. In 2005, physical anthropologist Eric Trinkhaus of Washington University in St. Louis published a study in the Times Journal of Archaeological Science, Times examining ancient human toe bones. He compared the toe bones of Neanderthals, a closely related human species that lived alongside early modern humans, with the toe bones of modern humans from about 40,000 years ago. He found something nobody expected. Around 40,000 years ago, the smaller toes of modern humans suddenly became more slender and more delicate. Neanderthal toes were thicker, stronger, more robust. Trinkhaus argued that this bone change was caused by the use of shoes. When you wear shoes, your smaller toes do less work. They don't grip the ground. They don't push off. Over generations, if people wore shoes regularly, their small toes would naturally become weaker and thinner. This is an idea called TIMES, phenotypic plasticity. TIMES, the ability of a body to physically change in response to how it is used. It is not evolution in the traditional genetic sense. It is the body adapting within a single lifetime, and those adaptations can be measured in bones. Trinkaus concluded that anatomically modern humans were probably wearing some kind of foot covering around 40,000 years ago. Not the full, structured shoe, but something. A wrap, a sandal, a piece of hide tied around the foot, enough to change the way the toes worked. So here is the real puzzle. If humans had these remarkable, capable feet for hundreds of thousands of years, and if the environments they walked through included sharp rocks, thorns, hot ground, and frozen soil, why did it take so long to cover them? Part of the answer is that barefoot feet, grown naturally from childhood, are genuinely tough. The skin on the sole thickens over time into a natural pad. Research by anthropologist Nicholas Holovka, published in Times Nature, Times in 2019, measured the sole thickness and hardness of people in Kenya and the United States. Barefoot Kenyans had thick, hard soles but retained nerve sensitivity. Their feet were cushioned but still felt the ground clearly. Shod Americans had softer soles with the same nerve sensitivity, which means the cushioning of shoes doesn't actually reduce the impact of walking, it just moves it around. But here's where it gets unsettling. Holovka's research suggested that barefoot walking on natural ground might actually send beneficial sensory signals up through the leg and into the spine. Signals that help with balance, coordination, and joint health. Shoes, by padding the foot, may reduce those signals. Which means for the vast majority of human history, walking barefoot wasn't a hardship. It was the correct way to use the human body. So what about cold climates? Ancient humans migrated into Europe and Central Asia, places where winters are brutal. Surely feet would freeze. The answer is both simple and surprising. Early humans likely wrapped their feet in animal hides and furs during extreme cold, not as permanent footwear, but as situational protection, the way you might put on a coat only when it rains. Evidence from Neanderthal sites across Europe shows animal skins were processed and used for body covering, but permanent, structured shoes for everyday use appear to be a much later invention. Anthropologists believe the shift toward regular shoe use coincided with a shift in lifestyle. Hunter-gatherers, who moved constantly across varied terrain, benefited from bare, adaptable feet. But when humans began to farm roughly 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, they started spending more time on hard, flat, human-made surfaces. Floors made of packed earth or stone, fields with stubble and debris. Suddenly, foot protection made practical sense every day. Archaeologist Olaf Gubitz, who has written extensively on the history of footwear in Europe, argues that the explosion of shoe-making technology in the ancient world maps almost perfectly onto the expansion of agriculture. Farming cultures needed shoes, nomadic hunter-gatherers largely did not. What is truly remarkable about this story is that the human foot still remembers what it was built for. Doctors today describe a condition called Times plantar fasciitis, Times intense pain in the bottom of the foot caused by inflammation of the connective tissue there. It is one of the most common foot injuries in the modern world. Podiatrists, foot doctors, frequently trace it to shoes that do not allow the foot to move naturally, or to people who have spent their lives in shoes and then suddenly walk on uneven ground. The human foot contains 26 bones, 33 joints, and more than 100 muscles, tendons, and ligaments. It is extraordinarily complex. And for most of human history, all of that complexity was used every single day, on every kind of surface, without a rubber sole between the foot and the earth. When Lieberman published his Times Nature Times paper in 2010, he wasn't just talking about running technique, he was pointing at something deeper. He was saying that the human body carries within it a set of capabilities that modern life has quietly switched off. Capabilities that were refined across millions of years of walking, running, climbing, and dancing on bare ground. Here is what this story really means, and it is something most people never stop to consider. For nearly 300,000 years, the human body developed without shoes. The arch of the foot, the spread of the toes, the thickness of the sole, the sensitivity of the skin, all of it was shaped by direct contact with the ground. The earth shaped the foot, and the foot shaped the way humans moved, hunted, migrated, and survived. That relationship was intimate and ancient and physical. Then, in the last 10,000 years, a tiny sliver of human history would place a barrier between ourselves and the ground. And the body began to change. Toes narrowed, arches weakened, soles softened. The signals from the ground grew quieter. This isn't an argument against shoes. Shoes protect against real dangers. They allow people to work in conditions that would destroy bare feet. They are genuine technology that has helped humans thrive in constructed environments. But the deeper implication is this: the modern body is operating in conditions it was never designed for, in ways we are only beginning to measure. The foot is one example, but it is part of a much larger pattern. Humans evolved to move constantly, sleep on uneven ground, eat irregular meals, and live inside a web of physical sensations, touch, texture, temperature, that told the body where it was and what it needed to do. Every layer we add between ourselves and the original environment changes that signal. Sometimes the change is worth it. Sometimes we don't even notice the cost until the pain arrives. The feet we were born with are not primitive relics waiting to be improved. They are sophisticated instruments built across millions of years. We just stopped listening to what they were telling us.